Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week our guest is author and Washington Post journalist Sarah Ellison. Remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. Now, we're going to get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. And please check out the link to this week's sponsor, EveryPlate, in our show notes. We thank you for supporting these sponsors. It helps make this podcast happen. Please tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. James, we are taping this on Wednesday before the first Republican debate. But without any real prescience, I can already tell you one of the headlines tomorrow morning or tonight. It's going to be the GOP debate was dominated by the man who wasn't there. There may be a subhead that says X, Y, Z. Maybe Chris Christie scored a point or two. This is a transparent fraud. This debate, it doesn't matter. Trump is way ahead right now. Ann Selzer's Iowa poll has him up 23. I continue to believe that at some point he's going to start to slip and even crater. But, you know, that's going to happen or it's not going to happen, having almost nothing to do with these debates. I don't blame Trump for not showing up. Why should he show up with people who are barely registering double digits right now? But we ought to remember that for all the focus on the debate, more important, he had another really bad week. He's not going to enjoy 901 Rice Street in Fulton County when he's arraigned Thursday. He's going to be treated like any other ordinary criminal. And some of his fellow indictees may be having second thoughts, knowing how Trump would never be loyal to them. The security chief at Mar-a-Lago got a new lawyer and just flipped. Apparently will testify that Trump sought to sabotage some incriminating videos on handling classified material. The former Republican Party chairman says, hey, these fake elector scheme that we did down there, that was all directed by the Trump people. Trump also finally decided he was going to try to raise money for Rudy Giuliani because he didn't want Rudy to start singing. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this, and I think we're going to probably see more flipping than a pack of seals before it's all over, James.
Well, first of all, they need to have a trauma unit on hand to deal with Ron DeSantis after Chris Christie gets through with him in a debate. I don't know, maybe before the debate, they'll stick a screwdriver in his ear and give him some kind of adjustment. I have no idea. You know, Trump is not going to show up. I mean, my favorite, and I don't mean to pick on her, but Michelle Cottle in the New York Times says Trump owes it to the American people to debate. As if Trump thinks he owes anything to anybody. It's so disconnected from any reality, you know. And I see Brent Baer, who is one of the good Fox ones, whatever that means, saying he must debate once for the American people. I mean, he's not going to do anything, and he's in a race against time. I know he's narcissistic to the most extreme you can. I know all of this. I think this shit's starting to get to him. I think physically and mentally, you can't be facing 91 charges, going to the Rice Street Detention Center. I don't care who you are. It's going to take a toll. It's going to take a toll. It just has to.
Totally agree with you. And, we are talking before the debate, so we don't know some things that may happen. But I'll tell you what I hope does happen. I want someone, Brett Baer, Martha McCallum, one of the other debaters or one of the other candidates, rather, to look at some of the remarkable things that Vivek Ramaswamy has made. Even in the era of Trump, he has said some of the most actively dumb assertions that I've heard in a long time. One, he's going to give parts of Ukraine to Russia. I didn't know it was his to give away. And then he's going to break up the China-Russia alliance. George Marshall and Henry Kissinger eat your heart out. He suggested the U.S. government may have been involved in the 9/11 terrorist attack. And then he said he's going to cut 75% of the government. 75% federal government he's going to cut. Now, I'm sure when they ask him, he says he's not going to touch veterans and he's not going to touch things that air traffic controllers and all that, which of course you can't do, Social Security, and he's going to gut the FBI. My guess is, James, that this guy is this is the flavor of the month, of the season maybe, and he's going to go the way of Andrew Yang, Herman Cain, and Larry Agron. Do you remember Larry Agron, James?
Barely.
He ran against you in 1992. He was the mayor of Irvine, California. And I think in whatever it is, 30 years, people are going to remember Vivek Ramaswamy the same way they remember Larry.
Ramaswamy's actually got a pulse in Poland. And I'm just sorry, but there's a certain part of the Republican press corps that just loves the idea of a guy, a tech bro, whose name you can't pronounce.
Right.
I mean, this is the Republican Andrew Yang, but not even that. Yang was a lot more serious, and I don't want to put him in the same category, but they just fall for that shit every time. Mm-hmm. Now, he's got a message that the Republicans are like. He's going to pardon Trump, but it's not Trump's fault. That's the only thing they're going to know about him.
Yeah.
But he's the shiny new thing. That gives you the state of the Republican Party. He's the shiny new thing.
Yeah. I mean, he really is. There's two things that I think I can guarantee. Chris Christie will not be the Republican nominee. And secondly, he will have a lot of fun and add some zest to these debates over the next 5 months. He is tough. He is smart. He's got nothing to lose. And he desperately wants to atone for his service to Trump. So I think you're right. He's going to go after Ron DeSantis. And what are you doing? A business Republican is not supposed to be going and attacking business the way you are. He's going to go after Trump, go after anybody. And he'll be the best debater, if that's the term you use, on that stage Wednesday night and also at the Reagan Library in another month.
Yeah, all of that's true, and it looks like the London bookies last week we were seeing around the curve talking about the over-under on Trump's weight. There's a lot of action on it, I'm told.
Are they going to weigh him, James? Do we know that?
Yes, according to people that are knowledgeable, that's part of the process. Now, I guess his lawyers could negotiate his way out of it, but if they treat him like everybody else, he will be weighed. Yes.
And what is your over-under now on that?
Well, I thought it was 287. Right now, it's about 273, 274.
That's the London.
But all of the movement has been up all week, so who knows where it'll be tomorrow. And I think Rudy's going to post a good number, too. I mean, it won't be Trump-esque, but I think Rudy is going to post an impressive number. But we got to wait and see. The one thing we know about when they weigh Mark Meadows in, his brain won't contribute anything to his total weight. That's pretty clear. So there's a lot, but we got a lot of action coming this week.
The reason to watch Mark Meadows is I agree with you, his brain's not going to add a lot to it, but he's got an awful smart lawyer. And when you have an awful smart lawyer, the lawyer knows that responsibility is to the client, not to anything but the client. And so I would think
they say he does, that this guy Stanley Woodward that was representing these people at attorney, and he's a very credentialed Washington lawyer. He practiced law with Stan Brand, who I knew Stan Brand. He was,
I go back to Tip O'Neill days with Stanley Brand.
Yeah. But this guy was, as soon as he got a court-appointed lawyer, he started telling the truth. And I've always wondered how a lawyer could represent Trump and all of these other potential defendants. But and Stanley Woodward is a credentialed attorney. I mean, if you looked him up in Dun & Bradstreet, he looks like he's totally fine. I don't know.
Well, you have to have both a good attorney and a willing client. And so I don't know. We'll see. But I do think I may be repeating myself. There are going to be more flips than a pack of seals in the next couple of weeks. It's really these guys are going to realize, James, Trump wouldn't be loyal to anyone other than Donald J. Trump. And they know that. And so when Rudy came and said, hey, I'm broke, I need money, first Trump told him to get lost, and then somebody said, hey, boss, let me tell you something. If this canary starts to sing, man, you are in deep, deep trouble. Now he's raising, what, $100,000 a pop for a fundraiser for Rudy this week.
You know, we've talked about this before, but that might be the largest fall you can imagine in American politics. And, you know, I don't know, that guy was a big deal at one time, and, you know, it's very likely he's going to die in jail. And deserves it.
He not only was America's hero and mayor of New York City during 9/11, but in the run-up to 2008, he was the front runner. He was the front runner for the Republican nomination. That always was a bit of an illusion. But you're right. I can't think of anyone in American politics who's fallen as far.
I don't think I can either. I mean, Nixon, but, you know, he kind of had a floor. I mean, people, I don't know. I'm trying to think of anybody who could have fallen any further. And, boy, it's hard to come up with.
Let me say something about Nixon. After his fall, I was working for the Wall Street Journal then. I went up a couple of times because we had an editorial board meeting with Richard Nixon, who was, you know, he was guilty of everything he was accused of, but he could discourse on things in a rather interesting and knowledgeable way for a while. Can you imagine an editorial board in 2 or 3 or 4 years inviting Rudy Giuliani to come talk to them? Now, first of all, as you say, they probably have to get him out of the slammer
or get him in jail.
Yeah,
yeah. It's one of the I don't know biblical or what it is, but I mean the fall from grace and the totality of it is just really amazing. And you know, Trump paid attention to him. Apparently, he's like a child. I don't know. You know, maybe, you know, there's some people that know him well, have written books on him. I just hadn't gotten a good explanation, but I'll keep looking.
You mean about Rudy?
Yeah.
Well, I think one explanation is he's always been rotten, but he just was able to camouflage it when he was the crusading U.S. attorney and even as mayor, particularly after 9/11. He did a lot of bad things beforehand, as Wayne Barrett and others wrote about it.
He did, but I got to say, New York in the 90s was just anecdotally, but my experience was actually, you know, he won re-election by a pretty good bit. And there was a sense that under his, people will say it kind of started toward the end of Mayor Dinkins' term. I'm sure that's right. You know, a lot of the stuff that Reagan got credit for, defense buildup, started under President Carter. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. But my sense was he was a competent mayor, and he was the U.S. attorney when all that happened. You know, I guess his flaws were always there. But in, you know, 9/11, he did grab the bull by the horn.
Well, he was a hero then. James, let me ask you this: Who in the Trump circle in the last 5 or 6 years has a reputation either as good or better than when they entered?
What's the guy's name? Miles? The one,
who? The
Homeland Security guy, something Miles.
The guy who issued the report, right.
Yeah. He seems to, you know, no, I mean, but in the magnitude of the falls, you know, Rex Tillerson still strikes me as one of, and the guy doesn't even defend himself. He just, and he called Trump a fucking moron, which is, of course, he was right. But they just, I don't know. I can't understand that because he was a CEO of Exxon. He looks like a man who just is beaten and doesn't have any pride. But they all have fallen. They all, you know, fallen so far. It's ridiculous.
I think Jim Mattis may be an exception. I do remember when they had that cabinet meeting and they televised. They brought in the cameras.
I remember that.
To stand up and say how great Donald Trump was. I mean, it was really it was just one of the most humiliating, awful things I've ever seen. And Mattis, to his credit, stood up and praised the men and women in uniform And I'm sure that just infuriated Trump. But
yeah, I think General Mattis's reputation is intact. You know, he's done everything he can to, you know, he leaks to Jeffrey Goldberg every other day. But, you know, there's things I do wish he would be a little more public, but it wouldn't matter anyway. So what the hell? There's nothing these people can find out about Trump that's going to change their mind.
No,
you know, they're not.
I believe that if Mattis and a handful of others, Kelly and McMaster and those who were in national security, you know, do at some point say, not only do they oppose him, not only is he not, but he is a clear and present danger to the security of the United States. That may make a small difference. I
got General Kelly and General Mattis confused. It's General Kelly that leaks to Jeffrey Goldberg all the time.
Maybe
I don't think an apology is called for at all.
All right. Well, anyway, Donald J. Trump, have fun on Rice Street.
Yeah. Can't wait. I'm God Almighty to come up with, and you know what's going to really kill him and Rudy. The number of black people that are going to be bossing him around and handling him is going to be astonishing. And just one thing you know about Donald J. Trump and Rudy Giuliani is they don't care for black people at all.
Yep.
You get the drift.
Yep.
I couldn't. One of the things in the press, the night when they were going live and they were handing down indictments in Fulton County, and maybe I missed it, but I was going channel surfing and nobody mentioned the kind of racial aspect of it. I thought it was really something about modern America and justice and what Trump was facing. But I mean, the clerk was a black lady, the sheriff's a black guy, the prosecutors, you know, obviously a black female, and you know, Trump's racism is well known, manifested. At least he doesn't try to hide it very much. And Rudy's is unbelievable. What they did, and we talked about this before, what they did to that Miss Shia Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman, that's the worst crap it's unimaginable somebody do that in 2023 in this country, but they did.
Well, those women, their lawyer Michael Gottlieb is going to bankrupt Rudy before it's all over. The only problem is, I told Mike, the only problem is Rudy may be bankrupt before he gets there. But
right, yeah, I think he's going to be. There ain't going to be nothing much left, but I don't. They may end up suing Trump too.
Yeah. All right. We will have a vivid, even though it's 6 days later, of Donald J. Trump at Rice Street next week. Okay.
I had a interesting thing. My hygienist, I said, there's a new Italian deli on Tropatula Street. Y'all should try it for lunch. He said, James, we don't go out for lunch anymore. Costs are too high. We bring it in. And I'm thinking about taking this product and you know, kind of gifting them maybe for the holidays, a bunch of these meals. But the food costs are really hammering people. The other thing is, how many times, if you're not price sensitive, you sit at home, you're watching a debate tomorrow night, maybe you're watching a game, you know, the baseball playoffs, the football season starting, and you are out of it, but that's probably not your best choice. And you get this stuff, it's economical, you pop it in the oven, and the stuff is good, and it's like good for you. It's all thought out. You don't have to do anything. I mean, it's a real lifestyle change.
Well, you know, you are right, James Carville. So when you're looking to save big on food, you need to choose EveryPlate over takeout. You'll still enjoy quick, satisfying meals, and they even get more satisfying knowing EveryPlate meals are 50% cheaper. 50% cheaper than your average fast casual meal. And that's not counting all the fees that come with restaurant delivery. EveryPlate is the easiest way to eat affordably. So put the money you save towards making fall plans or another vacation. While you're saving, you can count on EveryPlate to make meal times easier without compromising on quality or taste. Their ingredients are delicious and only use the best ingredients. They're sourced sustainably, too. Their seafood proudly meets the Monterey Bay Aquarium seafood rankings. So you know your meals will be fresh, flavorful, and have you looking forward to the next one. We all should be making sustainable choices. So join us in doing our part by eating with EveryPlate. We also love that they offset 100% of their delivery emissions, and their meals have a 31% lower carbon footprint on average than supermarket meals of the same portion. Plus, nearly all packaging materials are curbside recyclable in most of the U.S. Now, how great? Now, just think, James, how great is saving money and the planet over a tasty meal?
And did you get to stay home?
Yeah,
I think I think this thing is going to really take off, and come the fall when you like to stay home because there's a lot going on, and you got a lot of politics, you got a lot of sports, you got a lot of everything, and you're not relegated to pizza. You can do better than that, and you can't do much better than this on anything, on a taste front, on a nutritional front, on an environmental front. It's just it's a triple. That's what I'd say.
It sure is, and it was really exciting to see that they're now one of our sponsors because it doesn't get much better. From a price point to sustainability, savings on delicious and high-quality food is what really sets EveryPlate apart and above other meal kits. After going with EveryPlate, you'll never go back, and you'll see why they choose the name. You'll want it on every plate you eat from. So get started with EveryPlate for just $1.49 per meal by going to everyplate.com/podcast and entering code 49WARROOM. Don't wait. Get started with EveryPlate for just $1.49 per meal by going to everyplate.com/podcast and entering code 49WARROOM. It's up to $110 in value, so don't miss out. You can even find the link in our show notes. Hey, James, we have our favorite media politics reporter back, Sarah Ellison of the Washington Post. Sarah, it's so good to have you back. Two most dominant figures in the conservative Republican circles have been Donald Trump and Rupert Murdoch. Never been an easy relationship. Privately, Murdoch thinks he's kind of an idiot. But your story, I guess a week ago, that Murdoch has been urging, and repeatedly, I gather, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin to run, giving him all kinds of friendly treatment and his allies. I don't think there's a chance that Youngkin actually is going to run. But is this personal break with Trump permanent, or is nothing permanent with Rupert?
I mean, you have to look back to 2016 when Rupert was trying to get Mike Bloomberg to run. He's never liked Trump. He's always thought he was sort of not a real billionaire, tabloid fodder, good enough for the New York Post, but not for polite company. But he fell in with him, as we all know, very seamlessly for the 4 years that he was president, and tried to break up with him after the 2020 election. All the viewers for Fox News sort of abandoned Fox, and then they kind of came back and got themselves into hot water with the Dominion lawsuit. So Rupert, I mean, every time I write a story like this that says Rupert is cooling on Trump or has said something privately about Trump, says he wants to make Trump a non-person, as he did in private messages that we saw throughout the Dominion litigation, sort of never say never. I mean, I think that the answer is nothing is permanent, but Rupert, I mean, he's kind of getting old. I think his instincts are getting a little soft, actually. I think the Glenn Youngkin thing is like you think a pipe dream. Yep. But he just can't bring himself to fully ever break with Trump, but he keeps playing the field.
Well, as you say, we saw in the Dominion suit, the top Fox people, they both hate and they fear Trump. And they took a hit, as you noted in the beginning. What kind of treatment is Trump getting now on Fox?
It's not even bad. It's not even bad. I mean, we just wrote a story this morning about how Trump and Tucker Carlson are, a week ago, Tucker interviewed Trump for an interview that is going to air during the debate tonight that Fox hosted, official RNC debate, the same day that Tucker was meeting with Trump at his Bedminster club. He was doing another interview with Fox News that same day at a different part of the club. So Trump will interview with anybody who will have him, and Fox continues to have him. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, it does. And Sarah, we noted that Fox took a big hit, not only with Trump, but when Tucker Carlson left. But I think I'm right, and you know the data. But 4 months later, whenever it is, Fox seems to be rebuilding to close to where they were, and Carlson is struggling. The interview with Trump Wednesday night is online. I think he's got a book out that's not off to a great start. That's been the story of Bill O'Reilly and others. When they leave Fox, okay, Fox takes a short-term hit, but they end up okay, and the others are never quite the same. Is that going to be the case with Tucker, too?
Well, I'm awful at predictions, but Fox loves to tell you this very thing, that Fox is a machine. Whether it's Glenn Beck or Bill O'Reilly or Tucker Carlson, individual humans come and go, but they know how to corner their audience and chase their audience. Sometimes they're to their own sort of corporate detriment. But Tucker, if you remember 6 months ago, right before he was, let's go back a year, people were talking about Tucker running for president.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And now that he's not at Fox anymore, I think the book, his authorized biography, is now doing a little bit better than what they said it was. Originally, there were headlines came out said it sold 3,000 copies. Now it's maybe sold 11,000 copies. But that's very different from what the Tucker Carlson that we were all talking about a year ago.
Yeah. James.
So, Sarah, again, no one has to answer this. If Trump offers you an interview, would you interview him, or how would you treat him? He does interviews. He's a front runner for the Republican presidential nomination. He's also an adjudicated rapist. I don't know. Everybody criticizes the press and the coverage and this, that. What should be the parameters of press coverage for Trump? Is there anything? I don't know.
People have been trying to answer this question since 2015, and we keep screwing it up again and again and again. I was just talking to another reporter who was saying that newspapers and news outlets are falling into this trap again and again with Trump. You should call him, every time you refer to him, you should say, comma, who has been credibly accused of 17 sexual assaults, or comma, is facing 4 indictments, comma, is racist.
Right.
Nobody's figured it out. And this is now a broken record, but he knows better than anybody how to get attention. I'll just say one thing about this interview that he's doing with Tucker Carlson. They recorded this now a week ago, and Trump told his aides to keep it a secret that they had done this interview, and was even telling Ronna McDaniel, the RNC chair, that he might still show up for the debate, even when he knew that he wasn't going to. So he was sort of playing the will he or won't he game and playing the media the whole time.
Well, it's fair. All right, the media screwed it up. I'm not a reflexive defender of the media, but everybody says we got it all wrong, but no one knows how to get it right. So, in 2016, we certainly blew it, and we made too much about the emails and nothing about his sort of corrupt business dealings and his personality. Okay, you got it wrong. Well, great. And you keep, CNN did that, and there was a big outrage, and they let them stack the audience, and you should have. What do you do? I don't have an answer, and I haven't heard one, and I don't know if it's possible to have one. I'm not being
I mean, people say you do things like you have a truth sandwich. When you say that something, Donald Trump says something false, you start with the thing that's true, then you provide the thing that he said that is false,
right.
And then you provide more evidence for it afterwards. But it sort of depends. I mean, what are people trying to do? Are you trying to convince people who are, well, I mean, this all goes back. I don't have the answer either.
Right.
I mean,
okay. That's fair enough.
We can hang up now. I don't have any answer.
No. That's totally. I guess I would attack. You would say this is all wrong. I don't have an idea. They couldn't have that guy Daniel Dale 30,000 lies. The Washington Post fact checker, Mr. Kessler. I don't know, 29,000 lies. And they don't care.
No, I mean, there's this famous, wasn't there a famous psychological experiment that if you tell somebody why they're wrong, the more you tell them why they're wrong, the more they think, the more they retreat to what they think is right?
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff. And there's, and how many times, we send reporters in diners. We send them to the state fair. We interview some slob. My favorite guy of the whole cycle is the guy at the Iowa State Fair, the Republican, that yelled at Mike Pence, "I'm glad they didn't hang you," which was a nice thought. But again, I'm a sucker for watching Trump voters be interviewed and just sitting there, just unaware of how stupid they are. But it doesn't change. I have no idea. I'm glad to be critical. I just don't have an idea for a solution.
Well, I spent the week he was indicted in the third indictment in the Jack Smith case. I spent the day with a Trump supporter watching Fox and Friends with him I should say I'm from a small town in Pennsylvania that is like they say Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Alabama in between. I'm from Hanover, Pennsylvania.
Do you know who said Sarah Ellison?
Did somebody, am I quoting James Carville back to himself?
You are. Yes, you are.
Actually, the quote was from Paoli to Penn Hills. It was Alabama without black people, but that was a little too complicated.
All right. So I'm from that part of Pennsylvania. So I when people were going to diners, I was like, I know this country, but I spent, I've been living in Brooklyn now for 20 years. So I'm a little bit of not quite a Pennsylvanian anymore. However, spending a full day with somebody, watching Fox and Friends, watching Mark Levin, this person is never going to read the indictment against Trump, believes that Joe Biden has set his Justice Department unfairly against this man. I don't think there's any way to convince this person of anything that Trump may or may not have done wrong, no matter how, I don't know. I'm not telling you any answer.
And before I turn it over to Al, I just make one. This person, and I know if you had a flat tire, he would help you. If your mother died, he'd bring a casserole over. All right. He completely, believes that it's all set up and there's an international cabal of pedophiles. That's what really gets to me. It's the Hannah Arendt thing, the banality of evil and the crazy, and they're normal. You'd see them and how you doing? If you told them you had a new child, they were great. Or, you said this, just how normal they are and they act and how crazy their views are. I mean, literally nuts. And it's very vexing. Albert, I'm sorry I talked too much.
No, you didn't. And you didn't. And you said nothing critical about Hanover, Pennsylvania, so that's good.
No, I don't. I can't say anything bad about people in my own family. But they're wonderful people. But, But I got, whenever somebody says, I do my own research, I go, oh, holy mother of God, just let me get out of here. That means, oh, my God.
But, hey, Sarah, I think you're right. It's just there's no easy answer to how to cover Trump. But there are some tests. I mean, I'm going to be interested. I mean, we are taping this on Wednesday. I'm going to be interested as to whether they give equal treatment to the Tucker Carlson interview and the debate the way they did last time a few times. They should not. They, being the media, should not. It's a sub-story somewhere. You cover it. And I was really kind of horrified at the second Jack Smith indictment, looking at CNN. I mean, they followed the plane coming in, and then they followed the motorcade. It was almost an O.J. Simpson. That's the kind of stuff that you don't have to do. Of course you cover Trump, but you don't cover him on his terms. I'm not sure they learned that lesson.
I mean, I agree with you completely. And at the same time, when people were looking for why did Trump win in 2016, everybody had an answer.
Right.
But the real answer was that everything was the reason. It was because she didn't do enough in Michigan, Wisconsin. It was because of Jim Comey. It was because of Russian trolls. It was because of nothing. But now there's no outside force that is making Trump popular. It's in the bloodstream.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think that and he's done such a good job of, discrediting. I mean, you both will know this better than I do, but my impression is that Republicans have long felt that they get a bad shake from mainstream media. And Trump gave voice to that in a way that no one really had before, was successful in sort of turning the popular culture against the media in the way that nobody else has been. And that means that people who are reading the Washington Post are probably, I don't know the political breakdown of the people who are reading the Washington Post, but I know plenty of people when I go to interview, when I'm in Cobb County, Georgia, people are really mistrustful of the Washington Post.
Yeah. No, there's no question of that. Let me go back to one more Fox question. Lachlan, the heir apparent, the son, as you noted, Rupert is getting up there in the years. Do you have any sense of whether he's at all different from his dad?
My reporting indicates that Lachlan is more sympathetic to Tucker Carlson's view of the world than his father is. So he's further to the right than Rupert is.
That's frightening. That's frightening.
But the company's, I think, much less powerful than, it's now diminished so much. They sold, it used to have all sorts of different levers to pull. And Fox is still bigger than any other cable network, but it's not as powerful, I don't think, as it used to be.
Well, let me ask you a question about the media generally. There was a lot of talk, and it was true, that there was a Trump bump. A lot of places, including the Washington Post, the New York Times, my wife's show and the NewsHour, everything really did have a Trump bump. What's happened since he's left?
Oh, it's just wasteland. I'm kidding. It's not that bad, but there was definitely, everybody was tired once. Once he left office, January 6th happened. And there were so many scandals the entire time he was president, and people were just fatigued by that. And what you saw was, as you pointed out, our traffic fell off. The New York Times' traffic fell off. People stopped watching as much cable news. And that will never come back in the same way because Trump was such an unusual being, somebody that of the like no one had seen before. So even now, Fox is already preparing people that this debate is not going to get the same kind of viewership that first debate that Donald Trump showed up and Megyn Kelly asked the first question about him being sexist. They're already preparing people that this debate, even with Trump, wouldn't get the same kind of viewership because we all know who he is now. It's people don't tune in the same way.
James, do you have a final question or two for the fabulous?
Yeah, I don't think Sarah's. Of course, I've been doing this for a long time, and hear about the liberal media, liberal academia, and my answer is these are all educated people. They're not. You're right. There's very few. If you're a female with a post-bachelor degree, there's a 90% chance you're a Democrat. It's not unusual. All right, so the Post tries to get this Gary Abernathy guy to write every 2 weeks to talk about trying to have, a couple of columnists and apologists. I mean, and I used to hate it when I was doing campaigns, and they said, well, somebody that reporter I think is a real Democrat. I said, oh God, save me from that, because they're so guilty about their political leanings. They're going to go bend over the other way. I'd rather have somebody. I mean, I'm serious. I've just watched. It's a human dynamic, and I'm sure that journalists and say we just don't do a good enough job of understanding these people. We really have got to. And you see David Brooks saying, "Yeah, they kind of been maltreated and looked down on." Oh, come on, man! If you go to Iowa State Fair, most of those people are wards of the state. They wouldn't know what to do without Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, COVID relief. And if anybody had a real beef with America, it would be black people. If what has happened to Red America justifies January 6th, then black people would be justified in lynching us all. I shouldn't say that word. Would be justified in hanging us all, to tell you the truth. But there's just this great yearn to understand these people, and I think at the bottom we may just have to come with the grips that they are capable of doing kind things, but essentially cruel people. I don't know.
Well, I wonder. There are a bunch of Bernie Sanders sort of former Bernie Sanders sort of political people who worked on his campaign,
right?
Who've now started a new company, a media company, where they are focusing mostly on blue collar people who feel like no media, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, like no one is speaking to them. And I think that that's something where if we're looking at economic insecurity, and obviously, we don't pay, there are all these new startups that are going for college educated, mostly white readers. And we don't have, when you say we want to understand these people, but there may be bad people, I think that we don't spend enough time I think that there's a lot of justified grievance that people have, and we just distract them with culture war stuff all the time.
I shut up here. I think a lot of it is cultural, and I think that no one makes movies about them anymore. No one writes books about them. They're not TV shows about them. They're not even in ads. Okay, you watch TV ads. If you're watching anything, you're watching a game on TV, you're watching a debate tonight, see how many people in the ads would be someone that you went to high school with in Hanover, Pennsylvania. The answer is not very many.
Yeah.
That is a lot of the cultural alienation. They don't feel like the culture sees them, and Trump does. That's I can do.
I think that's right.
Well, Sarah Ellison, you, as always, have enlightened and edified us, and we got 14 and a half more months, I think, and we hope you'll come back early and often, because you are the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
As did I.
It's kind of zigzag, but so what? That's what life is. It's one big zigzag.
Hey, James, now I'm going to combine the outrage and our Screw the Voter segment in one piece. As the Brennan Center notes, sometimes overlooked in the attempt to overturn the legitimate presidential election was the harassment and threats faced by election workers. One of the many virtues of the American election system is the tens of thousands of poll and election aides. But some MAGA-inspired thugs threatened them in 2020 and are threatening to intimidate them again next year. Look at what those poor Georgia women, Ms. Moss and Freeman, went through down there. It was just outrageous. However, an important counter has been launched by the Democratic Secretaries of State to provide private security for election officials. The offer is for Republicans as well as Democrats. I doubt they'll accept it. It's called Value the Vote, a tax-exempt organization that seeks to raise $10 million, focusing on helping secure the franchise in 5 states and stop the bullies from threatening election workers: Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Nevada. It also will seek to counter election disinformation, like right-wing groups distributing flyers in black communities with incorrect voting dates or polling venues. It also is going to aid in voter registration. Already, some states have tried to legislatively block such efforts. But the executive director of this group, Travis Brim, says they are working with a top legal team to navigate any challenges. So if you really care about honest elections and not allowing bullies and thugs to disrupt or threaten citizens trying to aid and protect the precious right to vote, check out Value the Vote. Value the Vote. It's about protecting democracy.
You know, I guess at my outrage, I could, like, Fox Business Channel accuse Biden of letting the California storm in the country. But my outrage it's more general. It's what the California storm, the evacuation of the capital of Northwest Territories, people in Maui jumping into the ocean, the 101 temperature off the Florida Keys of ocean water. The every day is breaking another heat record. It's unimaginable. In Texas, they're talking about training third graders in bleeding centers and schools and mandating what supplies each school has to have. It's Donald Trump. You know, I hate to say this, but if we went to post today with this election and it was Biden, Trump, a no labels candidate in Cornel West, it'd be no better than 50-50. I know we take some solace and we think the whole thing is going to change. We've had bad times in the country before, but I just hard to look at this, and you look at, well, say, as a Republican Party, in Biden, the public doesn't want the choice that it looks like they might have in 2024. I've always tried to be an optimistic guy, and, got a new grandkid, women's basketball championship, baseball championship. No doubt we're going to be, pretty sure we'll be top 10. Shit could be, top 3. It could be anything. But it's just when you look at today and you look at the immediate future, it just doesn't give you much hope. And in this climate stuff, and I don't think I'm wrong on this. I don't think anybody really disputes me. It's so awful. It's almost like you're living in the end of the world. And these people and these retirees from the Midwest that live in the Florida Keys, they'll get, maybe not this year. I hope not. I never wish a hurricane on anybody. Don't get me wrong, but somebody's going to get it, and somebody's going to get a lot of them. It's just horrific. The whole thing. I'm not very. When I look across this country, I don't see much to feel good about at all. And I can understand how with 3.5% unemployment, people are saying things on the wrong track. I don't know, but it's the more that I think about it, the worse I feel.
Well, if we avoid the threat of another Donald Trump administration, that'll be one good thing. But we still got a long way to go. Some good things are happening at the local level, James.
I mean, there's plenty of things. I was at Andy Beshear last night. There was we had the largest fundraiser in Kentucky history. And I mean, their job, their economic development stuff is just unbelievable. I mean, the way, of course, the thing he's most known for is dealing with climate disasters. I mean, tornadoes, EF5s in western Kentucky and floods in eastern Kentucky. I told Governor Bashir, I said, maybe the best way to run against you would be just bad luck. But I don't think it has anything to do with Governor Bashir's luck. And he's such a talent. Oh, my God. But, you and I talk about this all the time. This utter nonsense that there's no bench in the Democratic Party. And let me tell you, Andy is not just because I was there last night and he's a friend of mine, but he's every bit as good as any of the other people.
Yeah.
And
it is a deep, talented bench. It's just a shame they have to stay in the bench.
I guess, you know what, I should be optimistic because the only salvation for America, and we know this, is the Democratic Party, because there literally is no Republican Party, and there's enormous amount of talent that's sitting in the on deck circle. So I don't know, maybe. All right, you talk. I'm starting to feel at least a little better.
Well, that's good. Everybody try to make James feel better this week.
I feel good about the future of the Democratic Party.
Something good that's happening, okay? Everybody.
Right.
James Carville.
Right.
Now for our listener questions. And again, James, they are good. Pete in Raleigh, North Carolina said, what's the fate of all the reasonable Republicans? They deserve representation. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place, having to choose between the Democrats and the conspiracy-spewing, voting-suppressing Republicans. Do they try to retake the Republican Party, form a new party, or try to influence the Democrats?
Well, my answer would be there's only one hope for the United States, and that is the Democratic Party. But again, I have been consistent on this for a long time. I'm going to remain consistent, and I am positive I'm right. The problem with the Republican Party is the quality of people that vote in their primaries. Shitty, stupid, bigoted people are going to produce shitty, stupid, bigoted candidates. And, you can say you get frustrated at Republican office holders, you can get frustrated at everything, but the truth of the matter is these people are not going to change. That's the bad news. The good news, they're not 50% of the country, but where you get hurt is we should be united in our opposition to them. It might, until this passes and the actuarial tables kick in sufficiently that they're not a threat anymore, I think it is flawed, and trust me, I know how flawed it is and convoluted and conflicted it can be. I think the only hope for the United States of America is the Democratic Party. I really do.
Okay.
I really do.
James Lynn in Riverside, Connecticut asked, has there been any talk at all of trying to get Michelle Obama to run alongside Joe Biden as VP and getting Kamala Harris back in the Senate, taking the place of Dianne Feinstein? Kamala would have a stronger voice then. Lynn, there's only 3 problems to that. Number 1, Michelle Obama has no interest. Number 2, Kamala Harris has no interest. And number 3, Dianne Feinstein shows no interest in leaving the Senate early, even though she probably should. So I dislike the idea, but it isn't going to happen. So, Lynn, let's focus on the
one. I guess I read, I think this is true, I know I read it, that her financial business is now being turned over to her children because of issues. It's kind of hard to say that you can't write a check, but you can be in the United States Senate. I don't know.
It is.
I mean, when people appropriately pay homage to the great career she's had and the real courage she's had. I mean, she's had some courage, particularly on some of these intelligence issues.
I mean, she's had just an exemplary record as United States Senator, and it's sad to see it end this way.
Well, and it doesn't, I think it's time for a new generation, but the person that she's staying hurts the most is Joe Biden. And just my admiration for Nancy Pelosi just knows no limit. And I don't know why people can't follow her lead and let's get these talented young people up and running and in positions of power, in places where people can see what they can do. I mean, I don't want to talk about what Gretchen Whitmer is capable of. I want to see her do it. The same thing with Wes Moore, the same thing with Josh Shapiro or Andy Bashir or anybody.
Yep. Okay, James, we're going to got a homeboy for you. Tony in New Orleans.
All right, Tony.
You are fond of saying that black turnout for Democrats is tepid at best. You're right. Why don't Democrats hammer these Trump attacks on Fannie Wills, on Shay Moss, Ruby Freeman, and Alvin Bragg?
Well, first thing I'd say to Tony is I think they see that. I mean, in 2022, it was very lukewarm, mediocre black turnout. And you saw, black people are aware. They saw their willingness to use racism. They saw their willingness to do that. They can see what they did to Shia Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman. I think we can accentuate it, but I don't know. I don't know how, and you try everything you can. I mean, they've tried, Ben Wickler in Wisconsin, I can't tell you the stuff they did. They tried creative stuff. And I think we have a problem. A lot of it stems from younger black males, and they kind of hate, their image of the Democratic Party, I think is wrong, but their image is just a bunch of preachy people, that, doesn't want them to, go out and drink and have fun and watch football games. And they react against it. And, I that's part of what it is. I don't know, how you address it deeper. We clearly have a problem communicating with younger, well, not just younger blacks, but younger people of color. And I think that they think, not justifiably, but that we're in control of a bunch of preachy, stuff. And the other thing that's hurting us, we're just too feminine. I mean, I understand that females are, 52% of the voters, but our message is every time somebody's on TV, you talk about we got to get the women's votes, and it's really critical. We obviously have a gender gap. We do better, but they're putting off male shit at some point too. You got to be careful with this stuff.
Yeah,
you can go too hard in PR, and people just don't feel like, if I'm a guy working in a tire repair shop in Atlanta, I don't feel like the Democratic establishment really respects my life. And I think that's the way that guy feels.
Yeah, I think you're right. Jim in Babcock Ranch, Florida, says, is there anyone else in America now or in recent memory who has been charged with 91 felonies inside or outside of politics? I'll tell you, I've never heard of anyone with that many. I mean, Trump this is one of, could be a new record. And as Goldwater did with Nixon in 74, who would it take to say to Trump, we're done. 91's enough. We're not going for 92. Your support is gone, and I'm going to say so in public. Is there any Republican today who could fill that role? Jim, I'm going to disappoint you. The answer is no. There's a few Republicans who I think speak out. The Bulwark is must reading every day. They're former Republicans. There's a handful of office holders, if that, Mitt Romney, but no one. I mean, Nixon was done, actually, when Goldwater went down there in 74 along with Hugh Scott, but he went down. And I think most of them are cowards. And, James, those enablers are going to be treated almost as badly by history as Trump.
Well, the thing is that, the Bulwark doesn't have to get any votes. Mitt Romney's, he'll probably be okay in Utah. The rest of them, it's their voters that are the problem. And if they do any such thing as this, they're going to lose the election. And until they get better quality voters, we're going to continually be stuck with the same results. And man, if being indicted 91 times, if being an adjudicated held liable rapist, if getting billions of dollars from the Saudis, from having a meeting with Vladimir Putin was only Putin, Biden, and Putin's Russian interpreter kicking the State Department interpreter out of the room. If that doesn't move you, I don't know that one Republican senator saying something or a House member saying something is going to really matter. The problem is their voters and their politicians know what they're dealing with. It's just what it is. And yes, some Will Hurd, oh boy, he's going to do great. Chris Christie. I mean, no one's taking him on harder than Chris Christie, and no one is going nowhere faster than Chris Christie in the Republican Party.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. So it is what it is. Jeff, all right, James, get your odds calculator out.
All right.
What's more likely, Trump fleeing the country or going to jail?
Boy, I tell you, I would have going to jail 15-1, but he's thinking about it. And if I were him, if I were Donald Trump, and I could get Putin to cut me a deal and stay on the top floor of the Ritz-Carlton in Abu Dhabi, which doesn't have an extradition treaty. That's one of the places, a few places that don't have an extradition treaty. I mean, he could go to Russia, but the danger is that, Putin loses power. But if I were him, I'd get the shit out of here. And I don't know that none of these people are making him turn his passport in, which is pretty standard. I would make a decent book. It's a very good question. It's a provocative question, and it is not a silly question at all. Right. And I like anybody else. I think, man, if I was this guy and I was looking at all of these legal fees, I was looking at all these civil forfeitures I'm faced with, and I don't care how narcissistic you are, no one wants to go to the freaking penitentiary. He's not going to have any kind of life. I don't know how what would the Secret Service be able to do in a situation like that? I have no idea if there was a warrant for his arrest in the United States, but if he was in the country, he didn't have an extradition treaty, and he had, paid off the leaders or whatever. I don't know. But if I were him, I would be actively thinking about this.
I'll bet you that one of these judges in the next couple of weeks takes his passport away. But we'll see.
That's one of the reasons he ought to get the hell out of here while he's got. Of course, so he doesn't have a passport, but the Abu Dhabis don't give a shit. Now, what would the pilots do and the Secret Service? I don't know. But I'm telling you, I would be thinking of this every day, every minute.
Gail says, I've heard you say a number of times that Republican Party's nominee for 2024 election, that Chris Christie has absolutely no chance. Would you elaborate? They are not going to nominate anyone who doesn't pay homage to Donald J. Trump, however they do it, however insincere they might be. And Chris Christie is going to make a name for himself by attacking Donald Trump every chance he gets. It'll perform a valuable public service. But I'm sorry, Gail, he ain't going to be the nominee.
So a majority of the Republicans, all of this just validates their worldview. They believe that he's being singled out because he's the only person to pay attention to them, and the globalists and the Democrats and the corporate media, Hollywood elites, pedophiles, you name it, are all united in a desire to hurt Donald Trump. So if 91 indictments is just a lot more proof that they're right to them than 9 indictments would be. You're feeding on a hamster wheel you can't get off. And so every terrible thing that happens to them is further proof of their correctness of their worldview. It's really amazing.
Joni, we're going up to Massachusetts now, James.
Massachusetts.
Joni in Amherst says, both of you and many listeners have bemoaned the lack of messaging and effective marketing from President Biden. He has the platform and the speechwriters. So why is Biden not making his case directly to the American people through public periodic addresses on TV or internet or even a la Roosevelt fireside chats?
Well, boy, do I get that question. John, thank you. I think he's trying. I mean, to the extent, you got to understand, and I say this, he's an admirable man. He's done much better than any of us thought he could do. He's had an admirable life. He's not a salesman.
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry, he couldn't sell air conditioners in Phoenix. Or whatever the metaphor you want to use, but it's a good quote. I don't think, and he's just limited as to what he can do. And the hardest problem in politics is how you tell people the economy is good when they don't think it is. And by the way, when you think of it, gas taxes are now back to a year high. Food inflation is still sticking around. And I don't know if people are susceptible. You got to try, but I don't know if they're susceptible to a good economic message. Even though by every measure, every standard, the economy is good. It's really good for workers, but I don't know if they can be talked into it. I really don't. And I know that Biden is not the greatest communicator ever by far.
No, and he doesn't have anyone around him as either. But let's because the record's there, and let's hope they can do a better job in communicating. Okay, please keep those letters, emails coming in. If we didn't get to you this week, we'll get to you next week. Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you check out the link to this week's sponsor, EveryPlate, in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting them because when you do, you help make this podcast happen. Now, to keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can also find other shows you might enjoy in the Politicon YouTube channel or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. And remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.